There are people who can make you feel understood in minutes and still remain impossible to truly reach. They notice the shift in your tone. They remember what you said 3 conversations ago. They know when to joke, when to stay quiet, when to make you feel important. From the outside, they seem emotionally intelligent, warm, even unusually thoughtful. But if you try to get too close, something changes. Not anger, not rejection, just an invisible line. You can feel it, even if they never say it. And that's the part most people misunderstand. The people who trust the least are not always the loud skeptics, the cold cynics, or the obvious loners. Very often, they're the ones who function beautifully in relationships at a distance. They know how to connect without fully attaching. They know how to care without fully depending. They know how to stay present while quietly keeping the most fragile parts of themselves out of reach. It doesn't happen by accident. This kind of distance is usually built with precision, over years, over disappointments, over moments that taught the nervous system a lesson it never quite forgot. Getting attached can cost you. And once that lesson settles deep enough, it stops feeling like fear. It starts feeling like wisdom. That is why chronic distrust is so hard to recognize. It rarely introduces itself as, "I'm afraid of being hurt." It presents itself as standards, as independence, as caution, as being careful who I let in. And sometimes it even looks like strength. But underneath all of that, there is often a person carrying one painful belief. Closeness is dangerous. A lot of this begins much earlier than people realize. When attachment theory has shown for decades that the human brain starts building its model of relationships very early in life. Before we have language for what's happening, we are already learning what love feels like. We are learning whether comfort is reliable, whether care is consistent, whether the people we need will actually protect us when we are vulnerable. And when that early environment is unstable, confusing, or emotionally unsafe, the brain adapts. If affection is unpredictable, you learn to stay alert. If kindness disappears without warning, you learn not to relax too much. If the same person who comforts you also frightens you, your system receives a devastating message. The place I turn for safety may also be the place I get hurt. That kind of contradiction changes people, because the brain doesn't just store events. It stores patterns, and once it sees a pattern enough times, it begins preparing for it before it happens. So later in life, when someone genuinely kind enters the picture, the reaction is not always relief. Sometimes it's suspicion. Sometimes it's confusion. Sometimes it's a quiet internal voice asking, "What am I missing?" This is one of the cruelest parts of living with distrust. You can deeply want connection and still feel unsafe inside it. You can crave intimacy and panic when it arrives. You can love someone and still struggle to believe they won't eventually become another wound. People often assume distrust means not caring, but in many cases it means caring so much that the risk feels unbearable. That's why people with deep trust wounds can be incredibly attentive. They study people. They track details. They learn moods quickly. They sense shifts most others miss. This isn't always manipulation. Often it's survival. When your emotional safety once depended on reading the room correctly, you become very good at reading the room. You notice hesitation in someone's voice. You detect distance before it is spoken. You pick up on changes in energy that others would dismiss. The problem is, hyper-awareness comes with a cost. You may become skilled at detecting danger, but terrible at feeling peace. You may know how to protect yourself, but not how to receive love without analyzing it. You may be able to sense everyone else clearly while remaining unsure of your own inner truth. And that inner confusion matters, because many people who struggle to trust others also struggle to trust themselves. If your feelings were dismissed early, if you were told you were overreacting, if your hurt was minimized, if your instincts were repeatedly questioned, then eventually you stop standing firmly beside your own perception. You start second-guessing what you feel. You notice something is off, then talk yourself out of it. You feel hurt, then tell yourself you're too sensitive. You sense distance, then wonder if you invented it. So now the person is split in two directions at once. Part of them is scanning outward, looking for signs of betrayal. The other part is scanning inward, doubting its right to interpret anything at all. That combination is exhausting. It creates people who look calm but live in constant internal negotiation. People who seem independent but are actually trying to avoid the shame of needing too much. People who want reassurance but feel weak for wanting it. People who long to be chosen but feel deeply uncomfortable being known. And this tension shows up in relationships in different ways. Some people go emotionally quiet when things become real. As soon as someone starts getting close, they become harder to reach. They delay texts. They become busy. They suddenly need space they didn't seem to need before. It's not always because their feelings disappeared. Sometimes the feelings got stronger, and that is exactly what scared them. Others move in the opposite direction. They stay close but never fully settle. They monitor tone, timing, patterns, pauses. They need signs that everything is okay, and even when they get those signs, relief doesn't last long. Their mind keeps asking the same question in new forms. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And then there are those who do both. They pull someone in, then retreat. They open up, then regret it. They ask for closeness, then feel trapped by it. They fear abandonment, but also fear exposure. So they move back and forth between hunger and self-protection. To an outsider, this can look confusing, even contradictory. At times, it can seem unfair. But from the inside, it often feels like trying to breathe with a system that no longer knows the difference between love and danger. And here is something that deserves to be said more often. People with trust wounds are not hard to love because they feel too little. They are hard to reach because they feel so much. Their caution is not emptiness. It is compression. It is emotion forced into control. It is care that learned to wear armor. That is also why, when they do trust someone, it means more than most people realize. For a person whose mind has been shaped by disappointment, trust is not casual. It is not given because someone is charming. It is not built through promises, intensity, or perfect words. It is built through evidence, quiet evidence, repeated evidence, boring evidence. And that is where many relationships fail. Because people think trust is built through big emotional moments, a deep conversation, a dramatic apology, a beautiful promise, a passionate declaration. But for a nervous system shaped by unpredictability, none of that is enough. What changes the brain is consistency. Someone saying they care matters less than someone being emotionally steady on an ordinary Tuesday. So someone saying, "You can count on me," matters less than them showing up in the same honest way after the novelty wears off. What heals distrust is not intensity. It is pattern repair. This is what real safety often looks like in practice. No disappearing when things get vulnerable. No affection that suddenly turns cold when control is lost. No kindness used as leverage. No punishment for honesty. No emotional closeness one day and emotional confusion the next. Safety is not fireworks. Safety is coherence. And people who grew up without that coherence often don't recognize it right away. In fact, healthy connection may feel strange at first. Too calm, too slow, too uneventful. That's because chaos is familiar to many wounded systems, and familiarity can be mistaken for chemistry. Then this is one of the most important things to understand if you are trying to heal. Not every intense connection is meaningful. Not every spark is safety. Not every emotional high is love. Sometimes what feels magnetic is simply familiar pain wearing a different face. Healing begins when you stop asking only, "How strongly do I feel something?" and start asking, "What happens to my nervous system around this person over time? Do I feel constantly alert? Do I feel like I have to perform? Do I feel confused after most interactions? Do I trust myself more around them or less? Do I leave feeling steadier or smaller?" Those questions can change everything. Because rebuilding trust is not just about finding better people. It is also about developing a more accurate relationship with your own signals. Or that means learning to notice the difference between fear and intuition, learning that a boundary is not rejection, learning that asking for clarity is not weakness, learning that being loved does not require disappearing from yourself. And it also means accepting something difficult. Healing rarely looks graceful while it's happening. There may be moments where you open up and then immediately want to shut down. Moments where someone treats you well and your first response is discomfort. Moments where you feel guilty for needing reassurance. Moments where part of you wants closeness and another part wants the exit. That does not always mean you are broken. Sometimes it means your system is trying to update old information in real time. And updating old information takes repetition. This is why earned security matters so much. Now, not because it erases the past, but because it slowly teaches the body a new pattern, a new expectation, a new ending. Over time, with enough stable experience, the mind begins to loosen its grip on old conclusions. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small moments. You tell the truth and are not punished. You express a need and are not abandoned. You make a mistake and are not shamed. You let someone closer and discover that closeness does not always lead to pain. That is how trust is rebuilt. Not through pressure, not through performance, but through repetition of what was once missing. And if you see yourself in this, truly see yourself in it, then hear this clearly. Your difficulty trusting does not mean you are incapable of deep love. In many cases, it means the opposite. So you learned how to survive in places where softness was not always safe. You adapted. You became observant, careful, self-protective. You built intelligence around pain. There is no shame in that. The next chapter is not about blaming yourself for having walls. It is about becoming honest about which walls still protect you and which ones now keep out the very connection you've always wanted. You do not need to become naive. You do not need to trust everyone. You do not need to force openness before your body is ready. But little by little, you can learn this. Protection and isolation are not the same thing. Caution and disconnection are not the same thing. And strength is not always found in how much you can carry alone. Sometimes strength is found in letting safety feel unfamiliar without running from it. And sometimes strength is staying present long enough to discover that not everyone is a repetition of your past. Sometimes strength is allowing a new pattern to exist, even when the old one still feels more believable. And maybe that is the quietest form of healing. Not becoming fearless, just becoming less certain that love must hurt in order to feel real. If this spoke to a part of you that usually stays hidden, then you're not alone here. This is the quiet mindset, a place for understanding the patterns beneath human behavior and the inner shifts that slowly change a life. Stay with us, and together we'll keep making sense of the things most people feel, but rarely know how to name.